You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud. It's what women are actually talking about on Monday, the 4th of March. My name is Holly Wainwright.
My name's Mia Freedman.
And my name is Jessie Stevens.
I don't know if we want to acknowledge this, but let's just jump in and do it. You know how we changed our logo? And it's gorgeous and we love it. The number one conspiracy theory, because this is 2024 and everything needs to have a conspiracy, is that you, Mia Freedman, have deliberately chosen an old image of yourself because you're terrified of your aging face.
Some have said that you look younger than me in the image. I will just have it on the record that Mia is much, much older.
But then someone underneath said, she does not look younger than Jessie.
Right to reply, Mia Freedman. Old picture? Question mark?
Guys, you've caught me. It is an old picture. It's because I hate having my photo taken. Not because I'm like, ooh, I hate how I look. It's just because I find the process excruciating. It's boring. It takes too long. And I'm very lazy.
We can testify. Jessie and I love getting our hair and makeup done. We're like, any excuse, please put us in the chair. And Mia is like, absolutely not.
I will do anything to avoid getting my hair and makeup done. When were your photos done?
Oh, I think yours were done on the same day, but I think that you were being very impatient. You kept going getting lunch and stuff and they couldn't get the photo they needed.
And all of my photos, I'm sitting down, so they didn't work. So I had to use an old photo. Out Louders, look, I'll find a newer photo and we might slot it in. But our poor creative director, Harry,
she's been through enough.
I'll have to go and retrieve that top. But my hair's the same length. I thought I could get away with it, but you're on to me. Jesus.
Okay, now we've got that out of the way. On the actual show today, if you thought standing by your man was a deeply old-fashioned idea, a Spice Girl wants you to hold her beer. Also, why so many women's homes are filling up with cheap gadgets from a very specific online store. And two very famous men have dropped a home truth we weren't expecting. But first, Mia Freedman.
In case you missed it, Willy Wonka is making children cry.
Oh.
You see, you may have heard that there was a debacle in Glasgow where the Willy Wonka chocolate experience was sold to families as charming characters, extraordinary props, oversized lollipops, and a paradise of sweets. So there were these extraordinary AI images that were used to advertise this, I guess you would call it like an experiential...
I went to one at Fox Studios that was the Titanic.
I went to that too.
Oh, it was fantastic. I've always wanted to be on the Titanic. So it was sort of like that, but Willy Wonka, which I would pay big bucks to go and have a swim in a chocolate river.
Hundreds did. Tickets cost £35 each, which is around 67 Australian dollars. What did you get for that? Well, you got to go to a warehouse. You see that the imagery that was used was created by AI and made it seem like, oh my goodness, that scene, everybody remembers it no matter what version of Willy Wonka you watch, whether it was Johnny Depp, Gene Wilder or Timothée Chalamet, those gorgeous scenes with the Oompa Loompas and all the chocolate river. So that's what parents thought they were buying tickets for. Oh no. When they got there, it looked a little bit like a prison warehouse. It was described as an empty warehouse filled with lackluster decorations and few, if any, of the promised treats. Instead, parents and kids were given half a cup of lemonade and 2 jelly beans each. Hardly the world of pure imagination. People called the police. Which is my favourite thing. A photo going viral of an Oompa Loompa, which was just a woman wearing a dishevelled green wig and a brown dress. And she had this very sad look on her face. She was standing behind a black table with a bunch of test tubes. It was just like a trestle table.
It looked like it was something out of Breaking Bad.
There were a few posters put on the walls and children were crying. They were also very scared because there's been an interview with the actor that had been cast and paid not much money to play Willy Wonka, and he was given like a 15-page script to monologue at the children that was also generated by AI. And for some reason, AI decided to create a character that was not in the Willy Wonka story, which is called the Unknown. And the Unknown is a mysterious figure that wears a black cloak and has a silver mask, and it's an evil chocolate maker who lives in the walls.
No.
Sounds scary.
It's like the children's version of Fire Festival. I love that there was so much panic. What I would pay to hear that call to the police. I've been to a bad event. I only got 2 jelly beans. False advertising?
My child is traumatised by the unknown.
It's a long walk and an even longer photo shoot, the one a wronged spouse does when they're putting on a show of support for their dodgy partner. Geri Halliwell, long known as Ginger Spice, knows this because she had to do it on the weekend. Her husband is a guy called Christian Horner. Now, I need to apologise now to there'll be a portion of Outlouders listening to this who are F1 obsessed because Drive to Survive, that reality show, has massively increased the number of female F1 fans, and Christian Horner features quite prominently in that show. But I'm not one of them, so I had to bone up pretty quickly on who Christian Horner was. But what I have learnt about him from my entry-level information is he's a boss of one of the big F1 teams. So he's the boss of Red Bull, and he used to be a racing car driver, and he's very, very wealthy. He is married to Geri Halliwell, a.k.a. Ginger Spice. They've been married since 2015. And since she married him, Geri's had a full life makeover, it seems. She lives in this big country house with her 2 kids. So she has a daughter called Bluebell, and then she and Christian have a son called Monty, who's 6. And she writes children's books, she bakes things, and she only ever wears white.
Really? Is that a decision? Because I was looking at recent photos of her, and you're not exaggerating. I couldn't find a picture of her in anything.
She says that it has simplified her life. She says, you know how as you get older, you want things to be simpler. And so she's chosen one colour to wear and one colour only. I would suggest that if you were choosing one colour only to wear to make your life simpler, white might not be the choice.
Is it a postmenopausal thing that you can wear white? She is reclaiming white.
Do you know what it is? It's a rich thing. Because if you're wearing white, you're not getting grubby. You're not having to do many things yourself.
You're not on the tube.
Well, you're not making white spaghetti bolognese.
You don't have to cook and clean up for small children.
And it needs to be dry cleaned.
And in these past few weeks, she's been giving a bit of a masterclass in old-fashioned loyalty because Horner, her husband, has been the subject of an investigation into an inappropriate relationship with one of his female colleagues at Red Bull. So a woman that he's worked with had said that he was inappropriate with her and there was a power imbalance, and Red Bull launched an investigation. And it's quite high stakes because the Bahrain F1 race was looming. It started on Saturday. It was going to be the first event since these rumours came out, and lots of sort of sports level conversation about is this going to be the end of Horner at Red Bull? Is he going to get fired? All this kind of stuff.
And did Geri usually appear at all of these?
She is part of his brand. So she often goes to the races. She features on Drive to Survive with him, as far as I can see. And so I think that they as a couple are quite high profile within this
Okay, so
world.
they're like the Posh and Becks. Funnily enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, luckily, wouldn't you know it, the timing was perfect that he got cleared of this inappropriate wrongdoing just on the eve of this race in Bahrain. And it was phew, and all the headlines were Halliwell greatly relieved that she doesn't have to go and, subject herself to all this awkward questioning because he had been absolved of any wrongdoing.
When you say wrongdoing, do you mean that it was sexual harassment or?
The words used are always inappropriate relationship, right? So whether that involves sexual harassment, etc., possibly. Investigations cleared him.
So it meant that he wasn't going to lose his job. It was not a workplace issue. It was a personal
Oh, no, he could have lost his job and he still might lose his job.
Right.
It was a workplace issue because it was a co-worker.
I see.
Right. So a co-worker has accused him of inappropriate behaviour and it's a Red Bull investigation that cleared him of it. So it's very much a workplace issue. So on Friday night, allegedly, the woman involved in this case sent out to every person who works at Red Bull.
Or someone sympathetic to her point of view.
Somebody from her camp, sent out from 2 different email addresses to everyone who works at Red Bull, plus lots and lots of F1 journalists, plus lots and lots of other journalists, a massive dump, basically a link to a Google Drive that just had screenshots of all these messages that she says were between her and Horner.
Oh, wow.
And what sort of things do they say? What do those messages prove or disprove? Or
all of this obviously is a bit legally dubious because they haven't been verified that they're definitely from him and they're definitely from her. And obviously it happened very quickly and Horner had to scramble. They don't condemn him explicitly. Nowhere in here does he say, we've been having sex or so i.e. they don't prove cheating, or they don't say, I'm going to fire you if you don't blah. But If this was your partner, you would not be that chuffed. Let's put it that way.
Got it.
There is obvious conversation here that there have been maybe intimate photos exchanged, that they talk all the time, that, he's waking up in one part of the world and she's waking up in another, and there's a bit of it's clearly, if this was your husband, you'd be like, not keen.
Got it.
And if
When you
this was
say
your
not
boss,
keen, is it like cheating?
well, I don't know if they cheated
Emotionally.
physically, but something's going on.
Yeah,
right? Something's going on. Anyway, of course, the next day the Bahrain F1's happening and all this is blown up and all anyone wants to talk about is this and all anybody's reporting on is this and these WhatsApp messages and talking around them because they can't display them because legal, blah, blah. But Geri goes and does the walk you do when you're standing by your man. So she wears her all white and she goes with him to the track or whatever you call the thing.
Yeah, with the cars.
With the cars. I'm sorry again.
The zooms.
The one that Princess Mary had to do.
Yes.
With
Fred.
Who's now Queen Mary. With Fred, remember? After all of those photos came out and the stories about him staying the night with that Spanish woman in Barcelona, I think, and she also had to put on that happy face and appear at a public event.
So Geri did that. She kissed him. She made it very clear. And obviously immediately afterwards, because quite a few people in Red Bull are going, he needs to go. This is a distraction. This is, untenable. He needs to go. But he made a statement afterwards saying, I have the support of an incredible family and an incredible wife and an incredible team. And my focus is just going to be on my family, my wife, my wife, my wife. Like he just keeps saying wife and she's standing there. So I want to know, what does it cost a woman to stand by her man like this? Is it laudable loyalty because you're kind of going, all of you who are saying this about my guy, or is it kind of a cruel and unusual punishment in the eye of a media storm like this?
Well, it's interesting because we don't know what their relationship dynamic is. So we don't know of course, it goes without saying we don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
But you know what's happening in the media that all anyone's reporting on. So she would have been making that walk and knowing that every headline, every news comment, is just going to be about her husband being a dirty dog.
Of course.
An alleged dirty dog.
So you would feel ironically publicly humiliated even though you've done nothing wrong. It is utterly publicly humiliating. And I'm watching the Swans as well at the moment, the Truman Capote thing, and Babe Paley, the main character played by Naomi Watts, is also experiencing that. The way you are looked at when it is public, even if you've known about it privately, and maybe Geri Halliwell knew or maybe she didn't know.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there is shame and humiliation associated with being the wronged party?
Because it is saying he couldn't get whatever it is that he needed at home. Or she couldn't, so she or he went elsewhere.
So you think that sexist trope still prevails?
Yes, but I also think the other part of it is an almost…
What's betrayal?
Yeah, but it's almost like a delight in going, look at you perfect people who've been selling me this perfect image. Aha. It's not as perfect as we thought, even though, as you say, Mia, maybe this is exactly what Geri or Princess Mary or whoever knows the truth of, but there's something that we get a big kick out of, the idea that she's been cheated on.
And like out down spot, she can wear all the white she wants, but it's a stain on the image externally. And also perhaps we don't know whether this is news to her. Maybe they've worked through all of this and it's just now it's become public. She might have found these text messages, I don't even know when they're from, but years ago. This might have been the fourth time. She might do it as well. They might have an open marriage. We don't know.
Yeah. Even if they do, I think the optics of it is something we've seen time and time again. Like I remember Elizabeth Hurley. Remember Hugh Grant?
Oh, yeah.
And then he had the premiere of 9 Months and she came and stood by his side.
Divine Brown, remember?
And
he was arrested for picking up a sex worker.
And remember Dominic West not that long ago who played Prince Charles in The Crown, and there were photographs of him with his young co-star that looked inappropriate, not clear in what way, and his wife came and literally stood outside their home together for photos. Politicians always do this.
The most famous is Hillary Clinton. I mean,
Yes,
standing there
so
and
true.
that image, yeah, like they can change the narrative. There is nothing that makes you look more guilty than an absent wife. If the wife is away, then you're bad. But if the wife is there, in the eyes of women, you're somewhat forgiven. But it's a trap for Halliwell, because when the images come out, it's not the man's face we zoom in on. It's the gestures, the eye contact. At one point they kissed and that was all like, oh, what does it mean? What's she thinking? And the rhetoric around her was just, I was reading a bunch of comments and they were saying the word shame, no self-respect, you reap what you sow, she only cares about the money and nothing else. And a lot of articles saying she must feel like a fool. And it's just interesting that it's all on her when she technically hasn't done anything wrong.
But I think everybody is, you're right, there's schadenfreude in it, which is you in your white dress and you were rich. And as Mel B from the Spice Girls said recently in another podcast about how she referred quite sarcastically to how Geri Halliwell is Lady of the Manor now and how she's changed her image. There is a glee in this idea, particularly given Geri Halliwell and Christian Horner hooked up or got together right after he'd had a baby with another woman.
And there were rumours that there was a crossover. So I think that a lot of people are kind of going, well, there was a vacant position for a mistress.
Oh, my God. That's, you know what else is interesting?
But it's just gossip, isn't it? Like, isn't it just everybody loves
It is gossip, but it's also one of the things that I find a bit depressing about this. I know that that's kind of coming from a place of judgment to a point. Because another person who had to do this, of course, is Victoria Beckham, very famously.
Yes.
Right. So we've got Victoria Beckham, whose husband, I mean, they've got a long-lasting, I choose to believe, very happy marriage. She had to do this, of course, after David Beckham was accused of cheating with Rebecca Lewis. We've also got Mel B, who both Mia and I have recently listened to her interview on Elizabeth Day's How to Fail. And she has written a whole memoir about how her most recent marriage was abusive, financially and physically abusive, and by all accounts terrible, and has left her destitute. And then you've got Geri Halliwell, who maybe is fine, but, is being sort of publicly humiliated as the wronged wife. And these women were all such icons of what they called, and we all called, girl power. And it feels almost like there's a bit of extra glee in, like, even these women can't hold a man.
But girl power was always so empty. It was just like, what it was is about friendship. Their whole brand was not about any sort of power, actually. They were a band that was brought together by men for the sole purpose of making money, and it made them all very rich as well. But one of the big criticisms of that empty girl power feminism is that it didn't mean anything.
But it did
just
change
having fun with your friends.
But it did change the game. Like, a whole generation of millennial women feel empowered by the Spice Girls.
But what does that mean?
Well, I think it means that up until they came on the scene and did that, we were all just looking at boy bands. And I mean, we were talking recently about how many more powerful women there are in the music industry. And you could choose to track that back to the Spice Girls quite clearly. In terms of mass appeal, they were the biggest band in the world for a period of time, and it was the first time it was women who were in that spotlight. And they chose to celebrate, well, whether they chose to or whether their Svengalis chose to celebrate female friendship. Their songs had these messages of solidarity and empowerment. And so we can say that it was empty to a point, but at the time it was new and fresh. And I wonder if there's something a bit depressing that even these impressive women who went on to build fortunes and have their own businesses and all these things are still with these dickheads.
But does this say anything
want of
about
a better word,
feminism and power, or is it just about PR? Because are we just holding women responsible for the bad deeds of men? I mean, whether it's the mistress or the wife, it's just she can't win. Maybe she still loves him and so she just showed up. But what I can't work out...
Or maybe she believes him.
Or maybe she believes him. What I can't work out, though, is if there's a male equivalent. So if you're a woman and you've cheated and then you've got a big work event on that weekend and your husband shows up and stands beside you, then there is something incredibly emasculating
Kristen
about that.
Stewart. Do you remember when she was going out with Robert Pattinson?
He didn't do that, though.
He didn't stand by her. No, and there were those photos of her kissing her director in Snow White.
He had to. I think it was a move of power. I think it would have been really seen as humiliating.
What's the equivalent of emasculating for women?
Yeah, there's no...
But I just think, before we say, oh, it's not fair and why are we looking at Geri, there's human interest in watching how someone manages when they've lived their life publicly and now this has happened. I don't think we should condemn people for being interested and for there being media attention around this. I don't think that speaks to some kind of moral failure on the part of those of us who are interested to know whether she turns up in Bahrain and what's she going to do and how's she going to conduct herself.
Well, there's a microcosm of reality in this, that there are plenty of real relationships. When I say real, I mean, I'm sure their relationship is real. I mean, real people, ordinary people, whose relationships go through enormous challenges. And when everybody knows about it, whether it's just at the school gate or at the office or whatever, you have to make a decision like this yourself on a much smaller scale, because it's not going to be on the front of the Daily Mail and all those things, but it's going to be chatted about in people's group chats of like, oh, did you see how so-and-so's husband was behaving at that party on Friday night? Because as you've said very well, Jessie, like the women wear the shame of it and then they have to decide what to do with it. Mamamia Out Loud! Out Louders, if you want to listen to us every day of the week, and why wouldn't you, you can get access to exclusive segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays by becoming a Mamamia subscriber. Follow the link in the show notes to subscribe, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
There's a new e-commerce platform that's shot to the top of the charts over the past year, and you may have noticed it coming up in the sponsored links at the top of the screen when you Google a product of any kind, really, from wireless chargers to bathrobes and power tools. Temu, T-E-M-U, has been described as the love child of TikTok, Amazon, and a casino on crack.
It sounds so restful and calming.
Oh, my God. It's best known for its small, everyday household products and novelty items. So if you want a $30 doona cover that looks like fairy floss, or a $7 blanket that looks like a tortilla, or a set of makeup brushes for $2, Temu is where you should go.
Aww.
It was launched in late 2022, so it's a really new company by a Chinese e-commerce company. And it's very famous for its very cheap products. And it almost has this gamified shopping experience. Like when you go on, there's quite a lot of things that are animated, and there are like, you could win vouchers for things, and there's like all these purple animated envelopes flying around. They have spent billions cementing themselves as a brand in the American marketplace first, including $50 million for a couple of ads that they placed in the Super Bowl. And the tagline is, "Shop like a billionaire." Here's a little bit of the ad. It's mostly just music. So it turns out that it's not Temu, it's Temu after all.
At least that ad, it clarified how to say it. It's very clever.
It does. This really strikes me. And that ad is these animated people that are just surrounded by all of these things, and this idea that you can shop like a billionaire, meaning that you can buy a lot of things for a seemingly very small amount of money. The way it works, it's distinctive from other major online retailers in that it allows China-based vendors to sell and ship directly to customers without relying on intermediate distributors. A lot of the things that you buy online and in stores are, in fact, made and manufactured in China already. But this means that this takes out the middleman, and the manufacturers can get it straight to you. Now, despite its fast-growing popularity, it launched in Australia in March last year. It's now available in more than 15 countries. And within months of launching here, Temu had become one of the most popular apps in Australia. So as of today, it's still topping the Google Play and Apple free app charts. Well, it's problematic on so many levels. The term Temu victim has become the sort of de facto label for people ordering these, what you could describe as tawdry home goods from the app, only to open these packages and find something they did not expect at all, because the low prices are obviously an indicator of unethical production and sweatshop labour, as well as often quite shoddy products. So that humour is even funnier given the tagline, "Shop like a billionaire."
Well, it's even worse when you think about the possible supply chain. So there's been a lot of pressure on transparency about where is this stuff coming from and how come it is free, essentially. And I was reading about how it appears that some of it has been produced in a region in China with links to forced labour. And this is what the Chinese government calls them, re-education camps. And you have people who are not being paid who are creating cotton or particular goods. Now, there are laws all over the world that means that you can't import that, because Australia and the UK and the US don't want to encourage that. We don't want to be part of that economy. But when you don't know what the supply chain is, next thing you know, you have some goods in your home that have been created in a re-education camp in China.
By children, potentially.
And that's why it cost you 47 cents. I went on because I I'm revolted by it. And this is very similar to, remember we talked about Shein?
Yeah.
Shein, yeah. One thing is that it's a bunch of stuff no one needs. And it feels like almost the equivalent of an infomercial. You know how a generation ago it was like you saw the George Foreman grill or whatever it was, and it was like a status symbol to have that. There's now such status in a bargain. So to say I got this and it was $4 is
100%.
kind of a cool thing. But I went on and it literally had—
What'd you buy?
Oh my God. It's just revolting. So a $5 lingerie set. I don't want that on my bits. Women's shoes from 49 cents. A $6 light and a $15 car vacuum. And the worry is that you don't buy one thing, you buy 47 things. And then when they arrive, when the $15 car vacuum doesn't work, which it won't, you won't send it back because why would you? The shipping would cost more. So and I understand the appeal because we are in a cost of living and it has met its moment. It has gone cost of living. No one can afford anything. It's Christmas, it's a child's birthday, and you can just give them crap, which is what they want.
Well, never mind that. That's what they're buying. The only reason I know about Temu is because of my daughter, who's 14 and who—
What does she want
all
from
of
there?
her friends only want to shop on Temu.
Stuff. It's just stuff.
So, well, for example, she wanted these big slippers that look like, big puffy up slippers that look like Jordan trainers, right? She wants clothes and she wants this and that. And because it's on your phone and it's gamified, all the kids, they share their Temu hauls, they share their free hauls because if you get a certain amount of points. Now, obviously, as a responsible parent, just like I did with Shein, because when my daughter discovered Shein, she was like, oh my gosh. Because of course, like kids don't have any money. And they're like, I can buy 14 T-shirts for $4. And you sit down and explain to them why they're $4. And then now she knows, well, that's icky. And then Temu steps in and she's like, but this is great. And you're like, okay, let's sit down and discuss why that's icky. So for a start, they've got this youth market. There's no accident that the ads are animated, that it's all very shoppable on your phone, that it's all TikTok central because they are going for these kids. But also, there are a lot of people in the world who can't afford, we were talking last week about small treat culture.
Yeah.
This is that
It's a little treat.
writ large, is that life's hard and you're working freaking hard and it's hard to make your money go anywhere. And yet you can have a tissue dispenser for your bathroom that's in the shape of a palm tree or whatever for not very much money, and it's going to turn up in a parcel. And just the action of having parcels arrive at your house makes you feel like it's a gift and makes you feel like it's a present. Definitely a little treat. The thing is that we're right to be very suspicious and disgusted about this. Their HQ is actually in Ireland because they're preempting the notion that at some point legislation will cut them off from being able to trade directly from China. So they've moved their HQ to Ireland. We're right to be very skeptical about this, but we would be deluding ourselves if we thought there weren't plenty of other things that we bought that had supply chain issues. So in a way for you to be able to stand on your moral high ground about Temu or other online retailers like this, you'd have to do the same due diligence for a whole lot of other shops. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't, but it's kind of easy to finger wag a bit when this seems just so blatant. And I think it's more about unpicking that culture of more stuff, more stuff, more stuff.
When you said, Jessie, before, it's about stuff that nobody needs.
Yes.
Isn't all shopping, like if you talk about essential items, most shopping falls under that category?
I mean, groceries. Most households in Australia, they're spending money on groceries, maybe clothes. People are struggling to pay rent and put food on the table.
Yeah, so you're talking about like the toothpaste flattener shaped like a frog.
The shower curtain with
Nobody
a cat's
needs
face
that.
on it. No one needs that. And it all—
But it'll brighten your day when it turns up.
Yeah, and it won't when it gets put in landfill. That's
No,
the thing. I don't know
exactly.
where all this shit is going.
But do you need another book?
Oh, absolutely. I get it on my Kindle because I don't like waste. But buy my book in hardcover because it's better for royalties.
We are all contradictions.
We contain multitudes.
Bradley Cooper is on the Oscars campaign trail.
He's Oscaring so hard.
You can Oscar too hard, and he
the-
has.
Like he's going to sprain something. It's making me feel very uncomfortable.
He tries so hard. It's like AI created someone who should win an Oscar and it should be Bradley Cooper.
Well,
and
no,
yes.
because he hasn't done his hard yards. That's what the Oscars are about. It's not about your actual movie. It's more like, I really want it, therefore I should have it.
And he really
feels
wants
entitled.
That's not fair. Like this movie, I haven't seen it. I can't comment. I know there's controversy
Leonard Bernstein.
about the nose. I know there's controversy.
Oh, I forgot about the nose.
No,
Yes.
we smoothed past that.
We did talk about it for a while, though, didn't we? We moved past it. But he made A Star is Born. That's a bloody great
That
movie.
was a great film. He should have won an Oscar.
That man works hard and he's very talented.
Silver
I
Linings.
won't have a word against him.
He's a brilliant actor. He's a brilliant actor. And
He's
maybe he
apparently
deserves
one of the
it.
most well-liked actors in Hollywood. But there's something about the way he's been – I mean, it's so obviously a paint-by-numbers Oscar film that's been like, okay, if I want to own an Oscar, it's the first time I've seen people get uncomfortable about a man's ambition because it feels very naked and thirsty. Anyway,
Very
we're getting
true.
off track.
Well, the film that he stars in, this Maestro, which none of us have seen, has received 7 Academy Award nominations.
I tried. It's really boring.
Is it? Well, including Best Picture and Best Actor, which he is up for. Now, the campaign trail is a careful dance. And as Lisa Hamilton put it for Mamamia, she said, they need to be engaged in the campaigning process, but aloof enough that the magnitude of it all doesn't make them appear too thirsty. They need to be earnest, but not to the point of being insufferable. Honour the work they've done, but don't take it too seriously. And look, Bradley Cooper has certainly made some missteps. But this week he appeared on Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and offered some really interesting insights into fatherhood. Here's a little taste of what he talked about.
I remember the first time I realized, because everyone's like, I would die in a second for my kid. I'm always like, if I'm being honest, I don't know. Like the first 8 months, I'm like, I don't even know if I really love the kid.
We don't know her
It's
yet.
dope. It's cool. I'm watching this thing morph. And then all of a sudden.
I love that honesty, by the way.
That's my experience.
That's a lot of people's, I think, and they're afraid to say that.
I mean, my experience was totally that. Fascinated by it. Love taking care of it. Would I die if someone came in with a gun? It's only a couple of months. I don't know. I got a lot
She just arrived. She hasn't even had any drinks.
I'm not
Let's see-
committed
let's see how
yet.
she is
I
in
don't know.
3 hours.
She could be an asshole.
A psychopath.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, no question.
I appreciate that conversation.
Yeah, that's actually hilarious.
It was very funny. And to put that into context, both Dax Shepard and
He did go on to say now he does
Cooper,
love her a lot.
he loves her more than anything.
That's really important context,
That's
actually.
the context
He did,
of it.
and he stopped referring to her as it.
Yes.
As well. That's important context.
He said that fatherhood has given him self-esteem and purpose. Both men agreed that they probably wouldn't be alive if it weren't for
Because they're
their
both
daughters.
addicts. They're
Yeah.
both recovered addicts. They're therapy dudes. They're those guys.
Yeah, and they're just in awe of their daughters. But the reason I found it so refreshing is not just because it was 2 men speaking openly about how much they love fatherhood, but it was 2 alpha men. And it's like while listening to it, we were bearing witness to a cultural shift in which being a present and interested and emotionally available dad is aspirational. The 8 months point is particularly pertinent because, Mia, you recently came across the term dad denial. What's the theory about how men maybe are able to have a little bit more denial than women for that first?
This was a great piece that I read about in Esquire, and it really crystallised some thoughts that I had about it, observing the fathers and new fathers that I know, in that, you know, if you are a woman who is pregnant and has a baby, it's very hard to be in denial because your body is changing. You have to push a baby out of a hole or have your stomach cut open and have the baby come out. You then have to feed the baby with your body or decide how to feed the baby. And a man doesn't have any of those things. I think that can be why when a woman has a miscarriage, it can really, I know I found that it was a real wedge between my partner and I because he could be sad cerebrally, but I found it was such a physical experience. Obviously, if you're the woman, having a miscarriage is so physical as well as emotional. So that then tracks all the way through to birth. And so dad denial is about at what point can a dad not kid himself that his life hasn't changed? And we've seen it in new fathers where they might not install a car seat, like say it's a 2-car family and the mum will install a car seat in her car generally, but the dad might not, or the dad might buy a really impractical new car or take up golf in the late stages of pregnancy. All of these things that are not compatible with this new identity that they have as a father.
It can build a lot of resentment.
So
It's
much
so
resentment.
common that women will say after the first year of parenthood, my life has changed irreversibly and yet yours seems to be pretty much the same
Yes.
with a bit of interrupted sleep.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because you feel like you got such a head start, and all the sleepless nights, the mental load of pregnancy and of going, all the prep, all the books, all that kind of stuff. I know
9
that
months is a great period of time to get ready, right?
to get ready
mentally.
But then there's, and I've heard a lot of fathers say this, that it's difficult to feel connected to a pregnancy. And a lot of women actually say this, that they don't feel particularly connected to the pregnancy either. But it's happening to you. You do feel the kicks. But for the man, it's a hypothetical. It's this thing that sort of exists in the future, sort of like a holiday you've booked, but you can't quite get into it.
And they're pretty extraneous. Even in those first few months, if the mother is breastfeeding, they're fairly extraneous.
Only
to the
if you let them be. You know what I think about that? Don't let them be. They've got to be there the whole time, watching the whole awful bloody mess.
Getting up every time the baby
Getting up
cries.
every time, doing all the baths, all that stuff.
I will say though, because dad denial I thought was a really interesting concept, but what I loved about Bradley Cooper saying this was that I know a lot of women who would say in the first 6 months, maybe year, they didn't feel especially connected. And they felt as though this experience of, I would take a bullet for this little person, they're going, I don't even know this person. And we have framed it, sometimes it's postnatal depression, but sometimes it's actually not. Sometimes it's just that matrescence or connection comes at all different stages. I kept saying to a friend recently, it's sort of like love at first sight. Your relationship isn't better or worse because you fell in love the first time you saw them. Sometimes a relationship gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and they're just different. And that is quite common. And to normalise people talking about that, because the shame of thinking, oh no, I'm not feeling what I meant to be feeling, which can be a real spiral. I thought it was really cool that he had the guts to say that.
I did too. I really liked this conversation, and then seeing bits of it picked out. Because the thing is Bradley Cooper and Dax Shepard are mates, right? So Bradley Cooper's usually very private. He doesn't really talk about his private life much. But he gives quite a lot in this interview. And then, of course, it's the picked out bits that are in the headlines, like he didn't love his daughter and all those things. And you're like, this is why we can't have nice things. But they went on to say another thing that I found very confronting, but because it was so honest, is they were talking about how much they do love their daughters now and how their daughters have saved them and yada, yada, yada. And they're both straight men, obviously, with daughters. And so Dax Shepard said, don't you feel like it's the first time you've ever looked in a woman's eyes and said, I'll never leave you, I'll love you forever, and actually known that you mean it deep down in your soul?
Meaning the mother of their children?
No, meaning the baby.
Oh.
I've had a family
So
friend say exactly that to me. He said this when I was pregnant, and he said, I looked at that baby and I went, I thought I loved your mother unconditionally. I don't.
And it was really,
I'd leave her under about 100 conditions.
Yes, and this is exactly what Dax Shepard says, which is interesting. He says, I look at my daughter, I look in her eyes, and I know from the bottom of my soul that I would never leave her, I would never betray her. But he's like, we can say that our romantic relationships are unconditional, that I love, and he's married to Kristen Bell, that I love Kristen Bell to bits, and he does. But if she cheated on me, if she started taking drugs, if she was having orgies with my friend, like, of course that love is conditional. But this love is entirely unconditional. And they both really agree about that. And I was like, that's really interesting because, you know, it gets a bad rap, and for obvious reasons, saying, you know, the love you have for a child is different and it's this profound thing. But it was really refreshing hearing these men say that in a way that you're like, yes, it's true.
Except that men leave their children all the time.
Well, they do, but these men are saying that they never would. So Bradley Cooper in this interview, he says, and I think this is about the changed status of fatherhood. And of course, he doesn't even live with his daughter all the time. Let's be honest. Yeah. His daughter is with his partner who he's separated from. But he says, I've now spent more time with my daughter in more profound ways than my father ever spent with me, and my daughter is 6. So it's like a generational shift of fathering that I think is to be entirely encouraged, where they're taking it, they're sort of representing fathering in a very different way.
Here's an unpopular opinion. I have observed, not every time, but sometimes, having just said that men leave their children all the time, and I'm not talking about divorce because you're leaving the marriage, you're rarely leaving your children, but some do, and some women do as well. But I have seen a lot of men, nothing can shock you out of dad denial faster than being a single father. And I don't mean if the mum's not on the scene, but often, and I'm really generalising, but there's truth in generalisations in this case, the default will be to the mother. both the child's default and the couple's default when parent comes to parenting, in the vast majority of cases, will be to the mother. So the father doesn't have to learn a whole bunch of stuff in a lot of cases. Suddenly, when it's 1 week on, 1 week off, or they're having solo time, there is no default anymore. So even though they're not with their child as much quantity time, they have to have that 360-degree
100%.
relationship. And I've seen it. So for people who are like, oh, divorce and terrible, divorce is never easy, but there can be some positive things in my observation.
But that's also true when fathers become sole carers for their kids, the primary carers for their kids in other situations. I've talked before about how I went back to work when my first child Matilda was 6 months old, and Brent was left with this baby like 8 till 6, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And he had to learn, that undid the idea of a default parent like that, because he had to. I couldn't pack the bag for him. I couldn't leave a list. I couldn't be like this and that.
You couldn't interpret why the baby was crying. And he had to work it out.
And at first it was hard for me too, because I'd spent 6 months being that carer, and I was like, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong, you should be more like that. But very quickly he had to learn in a really immersive way. It's like going to a school where they speak another language, and it's the fastest way to learn a language. And so
immersion, that's a great way of putting it.
It is. It's this very quick immersion. And so I think it's interesting that, I mean, you can pick holes obviously in these ultra wealthy, privileged guys, one of whom is, you know, not with his kid all the time anyway, going on about how wonderful fathering is. But I will maintain that the more positive role models we have of dads, men who seem to really, really, really like it and want to do it and do it well, can only be good.
It's good marketing.
If you're looking for something else to listen to, on Thursday's subscriber episode, we talked about the lure of divorce.
Speaking of single fathers and mothers.
Yes,
and
exactly.
people.
Because I'm seeing, I don't know if you guys saw, even over the weekend, there was this story about Jackie O and about how great her life looks post-divorce. And divorce is really having a moment. And we discussed the appeal of it and the theory as to why you might look at something outside your marriage and think that you really, really want it. Sometimes maybe you do want something outside of your marriage, but sometimes it's a mirage.
Big story that went viral in the last few weeks that we discussed called The Lure of Divorce, about a woman who got divorced or almost. Here's a little sneak peek of what we talked about.
I understand the lure of it, and I got to the bottom of it when I was writing Heartsick and I was interviewing people. Divorce, I think sometimes is, and this is obviously, you know, in some situations there's abuse, there's financial abuse, there is like, I have not been happy for 10 years. That's very different. But when it comes to an identity crisis and going, I am currently a person I don't want to be, how do I transition from old life to new life? There is something about divorce that can feel very like a transition, that it's almost shedding a layer of who I was. And I've had this experience in relationships before where it's not about the person, it's about who I have been with that person.
Who you've become in that relationship.
Yeah, and even instances where I've gone, I'm really not proud of how I behaved in that situation. I would really just rather cut this off and go and be my best self with boyfriend number 5.
A fresh blank piece of paper.
Yeah. A link to that episode will be in the show notes.
Out Louders, thank you for being with us on this Monday. Thank you for listening to us on Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, with audio production by Scott Stronach. And if you have any more thoughts about our new logo, just forward them to your friends.
To Mia's DMs.
Well,
Mia Freedman on
100%.
Instagram, just DM Mia and let her
I've
know.
got the tile on my thing. Leave a comment. Don't DM me. My DMs are very
Please
busy.
don't.
But leave a comment. Feedback is a gift.
It is, but I like it better when it tells us how much we love it. You love it.
You can go to Holly and I's Instagram to tell us how much you love it.
Yes.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and want to support us as well, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There is a link in the episode description.